want to say thank you all for being here. We're all here united with one purpose, that is to press the House Republicans to bring to the floor two basic common sense gun safety proposals. The first is to make sure that people who buy a gun undergo a background check. Right now, as you all know, there's a huge loophole because if you buy a gun at a gun store, you get a background check. But if you go online or go to a gun show, you can avoid that. So many, many guns, some say up to 40% of gun sales happen without a background check because of that loophole. So the first one is universal background checks. The second piece of legislation is a piece of legislation that says if you are on the terror watch list because it's been determined you are too dangerous to get on an airplane, then you also should not be permitted to buy a gun. If you can't fly, you can't buy. That's the name of the bill. These are two very basic, really common sense proposals that will help to reduce gun violence in this country. And all we are pressing our House Republican leadership to do is bring these bills to the floor for a vote. They don't even have to vote for them. They can vote against them. But they ought to be accountable for that. And the American people have a right to know who supports common sense gun safety legislation and who does not. And so, as many of you know, a group of us got together really frustrated by inaction by our Republican House leadership and tried to figure out a way to force them to bring these bills to the floor for a vote. And so, led by our great civil rights icon, John Lewis, we went to the floor of that vote. So we went to a floor house and we sat down. And so I would invite anybody who wants to right now come up here and sit down, because I'm going to, when we finish, to be part of this. Because I think that the significance of doing this is showing people what we're willing to do. Great. And we'll provide help getting up for the people who can't. So we did this, and to anyone's knowledge, it's not been done before in the House, and we did it as a way to really bring attention to this issue, and to really try to force the proceedings and force our House Republican, particularly the Speaker, to listen to the will of the people. 85% of the American people and 90% of the American people support those bills, respectively. So these are bills which are broadly supported by the American people. And what we didn't anticipate is that in the middle of the night, while America slept, they adjourned without ever taking up these two pieces of legislation. And you know, Jim and I have both had the opportunity to be on the House floor after a massacre. We saw the most recent one in Orlando, and before that, Sandy Hook and San Bernardino and Umpqua Community College and Aurora, and the list goes on. And we get up and we have a moment of silence. And what Congress does is exactly for 1 minute, says nothing and does nothing. That's right. And what we intend to do by this effort that is happening not only here in Providence and in Rhode Island, but all across the country today, and a national day of action, is to send a message loudly and clearly to our House Republican leadership that the American people demand action. They demand that these bills be brought to the floor for a vote, and that we do something to reduce the carnage of gun violence in this country. And so one of the most gratifying things was that after the 25th or 26th hour on the floor was that we knew outside of the Capitol, on the Capitol grounds, a crowd was growing. People just coming to show their support. Some who stayed through the whole night holding umbrellas through the night. And it demonstrated this incredible commitment. So I want to say thank you for being here. You're going to hear from Congressman Langevin right now, who's been a great partner in all of this. I know our wonderful senators, both Senator Whitehouse and Senator Reid, came to the House floor to support us during the sit-in. They even, the Senate Democrats even sent us food. So I want to recognize George Carvalho from Senator Whitehouse's office. We will hear from our mayor, who's here, who's been a great champion on this issue. Our former state senator and Democratic gubernatorial candidate, Murth York, is here. Thank you, Murth. Captain Allen from the Rhode Island State Police is here. On behalf of Colonel O'Donnell, thank you so much. Colonel Perry, I know, will speak as well. Mayor Diosa from the great city of Central Falls, thank you, Mayor. Councilman Salvatore, thank you, Councilman. As other people come in, we'll recognize them, but I just want to say to Moms Demand Action, the Rhode Island Coalition Against Gun Violence, and I know there will be other groups I'll recognize throughout the afternoon. Thank you for what you are doing, because we really need to mobilize communities to demand that Congress take action here. You have been doing that work, and thank you, and we all look forward to continuing to hear loudly and clearly from people all across this country who are insisting that Congress finally do its job and protect the American people from gun violence. So with that, it's now my great pleasure to introduce my senior colleague in the House, Congressman Langevin, who was a great participant in the sit-in and has been a great champion on this issue. And one thing I will say is, during the course of the night, almost every member of the Democratic caucus came down to the House floor to share words. And it taught me a lot about my colleagues and about the passion that they have about this issue. And Congressman Langevin shared his very personal story, and it was very powerful, and it took a lot of courage, so I admire him a lot. Congressman Langevin.
Thank you, David. Thank you for your words, your tenacity, your insistence that we get a vote on this issue. I was proud of the leadership of all of our Democratic colleagues, especially I want to recognize, obviously, Congressman John Lewis, who was our leader in this effort. But I also want to thank David and all of our colleagues who really stepped up and came together and made sure that we got in their way to get a vote. Because we had been so frustrated about this issue's lack of attention, lack of debate, and lack of a vote. And I just want to say how proud I was to be with David on the floor that day, and it was among the most meaningful, moving, and impactful days of my time in Congress. I just hope you're joining me in a round of applause for Congressman. Like that, I have to say, was just long overdue. And I want to thank you for giving us such a great turnout today for this sit-in today here in Rhode Island. And sit-ins like this right now are happening across the country in different congressional districts to continue the momentum to keep raising our voice, demanding a debate, demanding a vote on responsible gun legislation that's going to keep guns out of the wrong hands, out of the hands of criminals, those who are deemed to be mentally impaired, that would be a danger to themselves, to the community, and certainly to keep guns out of the hands of someone who is on a terrorist no-fly list, the no-fly, no-buy legislation that we've been demanding. I know we have many elected officials here, and David did a good job in recognizing many of them. So to Mayor Elorza, thank you for letting us be in your city today and participating with us today, and for your leadership on gun legislation and so many of the issues that are important to the people of the city of Providence. To Mayor Elorza, thank you. I know we have different members of the House and the Senate here and the Council. Thank you for your presence and your support on this issue. So, as David said, we are simply asking for a vote on bills that have the overwhelming support of the majority of the American people, even the majority support of gun owners, who believe that people who are buying a weapon should have a thorough background check. Again, so we keep guns out of the wrong hands. That if someone's on a terrorist no-fly list, that they can't buy a weapon because they're a danger potentially to flying on an airplane. We also agree that they shouldn't have access to a weapon either. So we're here today to continue this momentum, to make sure that our voices are heard, that we get in the way of Speaker Ryan and the Republican majority until they hear us loud and clear, and hear the voices of the American people that we want to vote on this gun safety legislation. We want it now. Now, many have said that on the other side of this issue, particularly the NRA, which many of my Republican colleagues have been afraid to stand up to and to speak out against, and to cast a vote that, again, probably the overwhelming majority of their constituents want, the overwhelming majority of their constituents, their gun owners want. And their answer, the NRA's answer, of course, is, well, what we need more is more guns. And that's going to keep people safe. That's going to keep our kids safe. Well, I want to say, and I spoke about this on the House floor, My life took a dramatic turn when I was just a kid. 16 years old, and I was in one of the safest places you think in the world, and I was a young police cadet getting ready to run my shift, and was in a police locker room, and a police officer's gun accidentally went off. Changed my life in a heartbeat, and I've been paralyzed ever since. The point of me sharing my story, thankfully my accident didn't happen as a result of gun violence or a terrorist attack or any kind of an intentional act of violence. It was an accident. The point is that my accident happened at the hands of two weapons experts on a police squad team. If they can have an accident with a weapon, anybody can. That's right. Having more guns in schools around our kids or in our communities, it's not what's going to help people safe. That's right. It's going to keep people safe. It's keeping them safe. So we're going to continue to get in their way until they hear us loud and clear and give us what is responsible and respectful and the right thing to do, and that's a vote on this issue. Let them vote against it, as David said, if they want to vote against it, but give us the vote. Thank you all for being here. It's an honor to be with you.
The mayor, it's just to reinforce the point, you know, there are, I think, 216 pieces of legislation that address gun violence in one particular way or another. A lot of really good bills. I introduced last December the assault weapons ban as an example. We started with these two bills because these are two bills that will really make a difference and that are broadly supported by Republicans and Democrats. And to try to force a vote at least on these two, and then we can get to work on the rest. And just to give a point of how strong the opposition is, even though these are supported, as Jim said, by 85 and 90% of the American people. So this is a thing where Congress isn't listening to the American people, the Republican leadership. The American people support both of these overwhelmingly. So I also want to recognize my State Representative Aaron Regunberg. Where's Aaron? Thank you for being here. And Representative Tanzi. Great advocates of the State House for gun safety. You know them both well. And also I want to thank the North Smithfield Town Administrator, Paulette Hamilton. Thank you for being here tonight. And now I'd like to invite Mayor Elorza, who's been a great champion of reducing gun violence and has called on Congress specifically to enact responsible gun safety legislation. And as a mayor, I know you live with the consequences of it every day. So thank you for being here, Mayor, and thank you for hosting.
Everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. I want to begin by going back to the source of the start of this all. I know many of us were watching TV or checking online when we first heard about the sit-in, and I'd like everyone here to make some noise if you all felt proud when you heard about the sit-in, you saw the photos of the floor of Congress, and you saw our Congressman David Cicilline. About more congresspersons, more senators coming to show support, and to know that we have a federal delegation here in Providence and in Rhode Island that consistently and always stands up on the right side of these important issues is just a blessing that we all have. So please, a big round of applause. So I stand here with I was sitting here, so we sit here with many of my colleagues in government, our colleagues in government, from Treasurer Seth Magaziner to Representative Aaron Regunberg to Representative Teresa Tanzi, who's been a great champion. to Councilman David Salvatore, and to Mayor of the great city of Central Falls, James Fields. You know, it's about community coming together, and I'm so appreciative and thankful. We have Moms Demand Action, we have folks from the faith community, we have the Nonviolence Institute, we have folks from throughout the city coming together for such an important issue. Rhode Island Coalition Against Gun Violence as well. So I felt very proud just several days ago to see that this is an issue where we're going to stand up, or in this case, sit down, and fight for what's right. And I think that we see the momentum building. You know, all across the country right now, people are sitting in and sending a clear message to Congress that enough is enough. The majority of the American public supports sensible gun legislation. The majority of the population of the United States who lives in fear or who lives in danger can be protected through sensible gun legislation. And how many more times are we going to have moments of silence before we convert it into a moment of action? And that's exactly what this is right now. It's a moment of action, and we are not going to stop, we are not going to back down until we get some sensible gun legislation that comes out of Congress that allows us to continue to keep all of our residents safe throughout the United States. Again, this is something that benefits every single resident in the entire country. It's something that is overwhelmingly supported by our country. It's about time that Congress act, that they take a vote, that they debate the issue, and make sure that they're doing everything they can to protect us rather than appease a very specific and very powerful special interest in Congress. It's about time we take Congress back and make them work for us. Thank you so much.
The community has played a very important role in, if you look at the history of the civil rights movement, and the religious community is playing a very important role in advocating for responsible gun safety legislation. I'd like to invite Rabbi Klein to come up and say a few words.
Thank you, Representative Cicilline, and thank you very much. As people of faith, and we are all people of faith, even if our faith is in something totally secular, we all are people of faith. As people of faith, as people of compassion, we are united by the grief and the anguish we feel over the senseless loss of life that we experience in this country again and again and again every single day. Every time that someone is murdered, a piece of us is murdered. Every time that someone is murdered, a piece of God, however we conceive of God, is murdered. Because we are all inextricably linked. We are all one. All of humanity, all of the sacred, all of the divine, we are all one. We find a universal yearning in every religious faith tradition and in every cultural tradition, in all of humanity, for peace and for safety, for a calm and for a non-violent life. We know that we can't just want non-violence to exist in our society. We know that our American passion and fixation on guns has gone way beyond that. We know that we must establish a covenant of respect and tolerance, of freedom and limitations, of understanding and of friendship among us. We must do that every day through the words that we choose. And we must do that through the legislation that we seek to pass. We must convince our elected officials to enact laws that will ensure that we have a sense of safety in the world, a sense of calm and ease as we go about living our daily lives. And we must thank and actively support our legislators who do work for this legislation. We are here today because we commit ourselves to doing the work necessary to change laws. We are here because we grieve for all the souls who have been extinguished before their time. We grieve for all the communities that bear witness to the unbearable and must somehow go on. We commit to work, we grieve, and we pray. Our prayers connect our beliefs with the divine and with the sacred in this world. And our prayers help give us the strength to go on when it seems too difficult to go on. In our prayers, we remember the thousands of Americans who are killed by senseless gun violence each year. We remember the children who will never grow up and develop their full potential. We remember the parents who will never see their children develop and flourish in the world. We remember the brothers and sisters who sit with an empty chair at the dinner table. We remember the friend who no longer calls. And we also remember those who have no one left to remember them. As we remember, let us dedicate and rededicate ourselves to do the difficult work and take the necessary actions to make the world a safer and better place.
When you speak about keeping our communities safe, just two facts that people should remember. It used to be the case that the majority of deaths of Americans by terrorists was caused by explosive devices. Since September 11th, 95% of the Americans who've been killed in a terrorist attack were killed with a firearm. And from 2004 to 2014, in that 10-year period, over 2,000 people on the terrorist watch list were allowed to buy a gun. So this is a question about, real public safety. And this should be, I think part of the reason our Republican colleagues snuck out in the dark of night is because there's actually no argument to make against universal background checks or against preventing people on the terrorist watch list. That's a debate we would welcome. The American people deserve it. And actually that night, while we were making these points, they turned off C-SPAN, they turned off our microphones. Fortunately, we had some young people in our caucus who knew about Periscope and started streaming it live. But the point is they weren't going to silence this important message, and the American people had a right to hear it. So I would now like to invite up Jennifer Smith Boylan for a very special introduction.
Today. I'm the Rhode Island chapter leader for Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. We are a national grassroots organization of over 3.4 million supporters that was born on Facebook on the day after Sandy Hook. Over the past 3.5 years, the Rhode Island Moms chapter has grown from a handful of ordinary moms to a diverse group of activists, educators, and concerned citizens, over 5,000 strong. We know that it's moms who are fiercely protective of our families and our children, and moms who will come together to make America safe again. In the immediate wake of Orlando, we saw a massive outpouring of concern across the country. Right here in Rhode Island, we came together at vigils and memorials to pray and grieve. And then something extraordinary happened in Washington, D.C. Two historic events, the filibuster in the Senate and the sit-in in the House. And these events reflect the outrage and urgency that Americans have been feeling across the country. We want our government to act. So I'm here today on behalf of Moms Demand Action to thank and cheer on the members of Congress who staged a sit-in for gun safety. I want to thank Rhode Island Congressman David Cicilline and Jim Langevin. leadership in Washington, D.C., and for holding this sit-in right here in Rhode Island. And now it is my pleasure to introduce to you the founder of Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America, Shannon Watts.
Jennifer and all the advocates here today a round of applause for keeping the So I came all the way from Colorado to be with you all here today in Rhode Island. My first time and I am very honored to be here with all of you, with Representative Cicilline and Langevin, and yes, everyone taught me how to pronounce that before I got here. You know, last week was the worst mass shooting in our nation's history. Let that sink in. 150 mass shootings since 2009 in this country. 91 Americans shot and killed every single day. And you know, I read the news this morning that 6 children had been injured at IKEA by some equipment they made. 7 children or teens are shot and killed in this country every single day, and Congress has done nothing. IKEA recalls furniture, Congress does nothing in the wake of American deaths. That's right. So, Representative Cicilline, we are incredibly grateful for your leadership. You sat on the floor for almost an entire day, and we stood in solidarity with you. We put in over 175,000 calls into Congress. That is pretty amazing. Keep in mind that after Sandy Hook happened, we were able to put in about 8,000 calls. Within 24 hours after Orlando, we put in 60,000. So make no mistake, this is a huge change in gun politics. We are seeing so much happen in this nation around it. Please do not be disheartened. I want you to know that we are winning. We are winning in state houses. We are winning in corporate boardrooms. We will win with Congress. It is just a matter of time, because if they won't do the right thing, we will help them find new jobs. Here, you know, in your own state house, you have a Speaker Mattiello, who has not acted in the wake of gun violence in this country. In fact, there have been some domestic violence bills that could have and should have passed, and we hope that he will do the right thing. Thoughts and prayers are not enough. Thoughts and prayers without action are empty, and they are meaningless. We are asking Speaker Mattiello, we are asking our members of Congress to act in the wake of human destruction by gun violence. This is a national crisis. It requires a national solution. And please keep your voices loud and strong. We're winning. It is only a matter of time. You keep this up, and we will win overnight. It will feel overnight. It has been years of activism, but you know, I have a gay daughter, and she thinks marriage equality happened overnight. It did not. I believe gun violence prevention has happened the exact same way. Keep at it. Thank you so much. I'm truly honored.
We've heard a number of statistics today, and it's really important to remember that behind every one of these numbers is a real person and a real family that has been devastated by gun violence and that is experiencing heartache that is hard to even imagine, let alone describe in words. But I'd now like to invite Diana Garlington to come forward to help us understand that this fight is about protecting families and what the impact of gun violence has on the lives of families here in our state and all across this country.
Good afternoon. My name is Diana Garlington, and on November 26, 2011, I experienced one of the worst nightmares ever. I was awakened by a niece at approximately 3:15 a.m. saying my daughter Essence Crystal was shot and that the car she was driving was flipped over and engulfed in flames on Broad Street in Providence. After arriving to Rhode Island Hospital, I was told that my daughter was deceased. I am not only here as a mother and survivor of gun violence, I am here in unison with my cohorts. Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense, Rhode Island Coalition Against Gun Violence, Every Town for Gun Safety, and the many other families who have suffered these tragedies due to gun violence. Our communities and families are suffering because guns are in the hands of the wrong people. We are not saying that law-abiding citizens should be punished. We want the guns out of the hands of the Orlando perpetrator who shot and killed 49 people at a nightclub, the Sandy Hook perpetrator who shot 32 and leaving 27 dead, including children at a local school, the Taunton, Mass. Mentally ill man who shot 2 and stabbed another at a mall, the mentally ill mother in Texas who recently shot and killed both of her own daughters in their very own home, and the delinquent and disconcerted youth who have killed 5 and wounded 22 people so far this year in Providence on our very own streets. 170 lives were lost in Rhode Island since 2011. 111 of these murderers are unsolved, with my daughter Essence being number 91 on that list. These are the actions that we want taken care of. How many of the parents and the Republicans have lost a child to gun violence? Effective elected officials must work as part of a team to establish a shared vision for the future. Make plans that make that future positive, and work with their colleagues and constituents to enact the local policies and laws. Last week's sit-in in the U.S. House of Representatives was crucial and applauded. Holding a public office is an act of service to the public that is service to all the citizens of the city or town, not just those who share your views or those who voted for you. Congress has a responsibility to enact gun violence prevention by closing the gun loopholes with stricter background checks, bans of assault weapons, hate crime preventions, individuals who are mentally ill, and those who are permitted to have guns even after being convicted of domestic violence or abuse. These are common sense laws, and we must pass legislation to keep our communities and make America safe. I want our children to wear suits and ties. We should not be promoting t-shirts with a deceased loved one's photo.
Invite our treasurer, Seth Magaziner, who's been a great voice for responsible gun safety and extraordinary treasurer. Thank you for being here.
I'm here today not as the state treasurer, but as a citizen, and I want to start by offering my thanks to Congressman Cicilline and Congressman Langevin for what they did last week and what they're doing today. I got home after a long day of work at the State Treasury. It's a busy time of year. It's the end of the fiscal year tomorrow. There have been some things happening over in Europe you might have heard about. I got home. I was all ready to unwind and catch up on my Game of Thrones or my American Ninja Warrior, whatever bad TV was on that night. And I turned on the TV, and instead I saw something really incredible. And I saw David and I saw Jim standing up with their colleagues and saying, we have to do something now. And thank you for that. Thank you for your leadership, and thank you for continuing that here today. Because the Republican Congress in Washington needs to get the message that they have to start listening to the people who elected them. We know that the vast majority of Americans support common sense gun laws. We know that the vast majority of gun owners support common sense gun laws. but they refuse to listen. They refuse to listen, which is why we need to speak up. We need to speak up loud. We need to speak up frequently. We need to speak up over and over and over again until we get the change that the American people want and deserve. I want to recognize also Mayor Elorza, Representative Regunberg. Thank you for your leadership on this issue. It makes no sense that you can buy a firearm when you are on the terrorist no-fly watch list. And in fact, as Congressman Cicilline said, between 2004 and 2014, it happened more than 2,000 times. It makes no sense that if you go into a store to buy a gun, you have to go through a background check, but you can go to a gun show and buy a firearm with no background check whatsoever. It makes no sense that we haven't renewed the assault weapons ban. It makes no sense that we haven't done anything in America about high-capacity magazines. So we got to keep pushing, we got to keep fighting. People want it, people need it. Already in this year alone, we've had 5 of our own, 5 Rhode Islanders killed by firearms, 22 injured. This year alone, more than 6,000 people killed across the United States. And if I can leave you with one thing, it's this. Elections have consequences. Elections matter. And we have a decision to make as a country. Are we going to elect people who refuse to listen to their own constituents, refuse to listen to the vast majority of Americans who support common sense gun laws? Or are we going to elect leaders like Congressman Cicilline, Congressman Langevin, Mayor Elorza, Rep. Regunberg, I see Teresa Tanzi here as well, who are going to go up there and fight for us? All right? These individuals in this room, who I just named, Congressman Cicilline and Langevin, they have elections this year. We need to send a message by sending them back so they can keep fighting for us. There's a presidential election this year. Donald Trump has said that he thinks there should be guns in every school. I used to be a school teacher. Do you know how terrifying that is? Just this week, the NRA has started a $2 million ad campaign of attack ads against Hillary Clinton for Donald Trump. Elections matter. Elections have consequences. So let's keep this movement alive, let's keep fighting, and let's keep electing good people who are going to go and fight for us. Thank you very much.
As Seth was speaking, I was thinking, you know, there are a lot of reasons that we could have had a sit-in in the House this year. The Republicans have refused to address the issue of affordability of college and refusing to deal with the issue of crushing debt of young people that are trying to go to college. They've refused to address wage disparities between men and women, providing equal pay for equal work. They've refused to address a renewable energy policy that really is important for the future of our country. And there are so many issues that, but what makes this issue different, I mean, the frustration that Seth was describing, we have that same frustration on all of these issues. But what makes this issue different is people are being killed in this country as a result of the inaction of Congress. Families are being ripped apart because of the carnage of gun violence because Congress has refused to act. And that's not to say we could pass a law which would eliminate every single instance of gun violence. But we can pass a set of laws that, taken together, can substantially reduce gun violence in this country and improve the safety of our communities. And so I'd like now to ask Colonel Perry, who's been a great champion for gun safety as Commissioner of Public Safety here in the city of Providence, New Jersey.
Thank you, Congressman, and thank you for all coming out. You know, doing the job of a police officer in law enforcement sometimes feels lonely. And when we have this kind of support, and when we go to the State House and we have people like you coming and supporting us, this is about safety for our community. It's about safety for our police officers that face so many weapons. So we appreciate your support. This is common sense. I've testified before the General Assembly. It needs no further justification. These are common sense pieces of legislation that will help our community here in Providence and in the state, and certainly across the country, with these common sense pieces of legislation that should move and be enacted. So we are heartened by everyone's support. We will fight to the end to get the tools and the laws in place so it makes our community safe. We have far too many people getting shot, not in Providence, but all across this country. And these pieces of legislation will make a difference. Please don't give up. Continue on, because we'll continue to be supportive and make these changes. Thank you.
I also want to recognize PJ Fox, who is the Executive Director of the Institute for the Study and Practice of Nonviolence. For the really heroic work they do, and because John Lewis gave me special training on what to do in terms of non-violently not resisting when they remove us from the floor. So, I also want to recognize the Bishop of the Episcopal Church, who is here with us, Bishop Kinsey. Thank you very much. Say that the point of this National Day of Action is not to just do an event and have it end. Just like our sit-in was not intended to just be end in time, it was intended to remain in place until we got a vote on those two bills. We didn't anticipate they would actually adjourn until July 5th. So, and so when we go back, we will figure out ways that we can continue to attempt to force our Republican House leadership to take up these two pieces of legislation and to, as Seth said, really to respond to the will of the American people. These are pieces of legislation which will make a real difference, which have the support of Republicans and Democrats by the gun owners as well. And we will figure out ways that we can continue to keep the pressure on them. But I can tell you right now, the single most powerful force in this fight is all of you and people like you all across this country who are going to be speaking to their members of Congress, demanding that they vote and bring these bills to the floor. And it really will require the active and sustained engagement of people all across this country. And as was said earlier, this can be, you know, sometimes it feels like a long fight. I mean, I began working on gun safety when I was in the state legislature. I was one of the founding members of Mayors Against Illegal Guns with Mayor Menino and Mayor Bloomberg. And I have worked on it since I got to Congress. This is a long and frustrating fight. But I think, I apologize, the president of Moms Demand Action, the point she made, that this is, we're in a different moment right now. I think the American people are really engaged in this fight with us. My colleagues are beginning to feel the heat, and we just have to keep the pressure on. And these are happening all across the country. So thank you for your part in this. Please don't give up your advocacy.